Welcome to another session of Vendavo's Commercial Excellence Month Live. It's 4 weeks, over 17 sessions, and over 27 speakers. So first, a couple of little housekeeping items that we need to go over. We've got our obligatory disclaimer. Effectively, that's saying what we're talking about today is, of course, subject to change. We will be doing Q&A as we go through this session. We'll have a Q&A section at the end of our discussion. Feel free to use the Q&A function there on the Zoom panel. Those questions are going to go straight to the panelists and the panelists only. And if we can't get to your question at the end through our Q&A session, be assured that we'll reach out to you with an answer shortly thereafter. So let's take a look now at upcoming events and what's coming up next. On Friday, we'll be talking with key members of Vendavo's value consulting team, how Vendavo customers have been successful using value consulting to integrate technology, process, and people. Just last year, they delivered $500 million of benefits across 27 engagements. This is a discussion you do not want to miss. Beginning next week, Commercial Excellence Month will turn to having a special emphasis on the Vendavo community with an emphasis on customer-only interactive sessions. Monday next week, we'll take the CPQ discussion to the next level. Jordan, Hahn, and Jose Fontanez, our cloud services group, and I will be getting into the nuts and bolts of the Vendavo CPQ cloud offerings. And on Tuesday, Carl Larson, Vice President of Systems Solutions at Vendavo, and Sjoerd van Kessel, Customer Excellence Strategist here at Vendavo, will be talking through the ins and outs of Vendavo Price Point. In all these customer-focused sessions, it's going to be discussions of real market solutions to real market problems. Now, folks have been asking for links for on-demand views of our sessions. Rest assured that we'll be sending out emails with those links and recaps a few days after the sessions. And of course, check back on our website as we make the events available through links, and so you can pick those up there. Our events run through the end of the month. You can use that scan code you see on your screen there to register, or head over to vendavo.com. But before we turn to today's discussion, let's talk about this month-long event and how these sessions fit into that in today's environment. Last week, we had a panel discussion with Peter Regan, Louis Columbus, and Stefan Leozo. Bruno Slasse and Alex Hoff walked us through the Vendavo performance history and strategy and the product roadmap. Then we had Stefan and Bruno in a session to discuss pricing concepts for action in the C-suite, and then a discussion with a long-time Vendavo customer on their success on moving to the cloud. Closed out the week with actions for pricing in a disruptive environment with Stefan Leozu on Friday. Across all these topics, we've talked about how things are different. These sessions were originally set to be face-to-face in person as part of our ongoing program of building a community to drive commercial excellence. Just like you, we've pivoted to continue to deliver value to our community in these turbulent times. The pricers, the sales leaders, the P&L owners that are responsible for sustainable profitability, recognizing that there are a ton of internal challenges and externalities to be considered as we work to create optionality for growth and investment in those businesses. To frame our thinking in these turbulent times, we're using a three-phase framework. People are discussing the shape of the curve, whether it's a V or a W, or now you're hearing a lot of people talking about the Nike swoosh. But whatever the shape of the curve, it's useful to look at it to organize your perspectives at what's happening and what needs to be done today, tomorrow, and in the future. So in that first phase, it's disruption. The unforeseen happens. That's what we're all dealing with. It's those issues that require immediate attention. Next, that pace slows a little bit, and you're repeating how you addressed those immediate problems with learnings, with the things you did once or twice before and applying those again. That's a sign that you're in the new normal. And now here's the difficult part. You need to be able to look for the shift. And if it's the slow improvement trend of the swoosh, it's going to be harder to recognize when that shift begins for you and your organization. That's more crisis. It's about being ready to thrive. Yes, you need to manage through it, but more importantly, you need to work to adapt yourself and your organization for what's on the other side of the new normal. That's the transformation phase, and that's the basis for thriving on the other side. And that's why we're working on commercial excellence. So for this month-long event, it boils down to this. We're connecting in different ways. We're now virtual, but the objectives are the same, and certainly with a greater sense of urgency. So let's get started. Today, we're going to be walking through CPQ as the ultimate tool for pricing execution. And joining me today, sitting patiently as I walk through the setup there, is Jordan. He's our Senior Product Manager for CPQ Products. He's been using pricing and sales and experience gained in his industry and academic research to drive strategy and innovation for commercial excellence. Jordan, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. Excited to be here today. And I think this is probably the longest we've gone since I joined Vendavo that we haven't seen each other and kind of had a conversation like this anyway. So it's good to be, chatting again, and we're just bringing a few more people along for the ride this time. But
Likewise.
I think we've got the challenges of the current moment, which everybody's talking about. But, even outside of that, I think it's a really exciting time in the evolution of CPQ and just commercial excellence in general. So really looking forward to diving in.
This is going to be a great session, and agreed, Jordan. I think a lot of people are feeling that same sense of distance and disconnection, but hopefully these kinds of events help aid in that. So let's take a look real quickly at the agenda. We're going to walk through how CPQ stacks up in the modern commercial excellence stack. We'll address some common misconceptions, look at critical capabilities for B2B commercial excellence, and then we'll shift over to how CPQ really does enable successful price execution. There's some simple steps around price control, and then Jordan's going to walk us through a couple of use cases. And of course, we will have a live Q&A via Zoom at the end. So Jordan, over to you.
Yeah, and before we really get into the meat of it, I'd like to start with a bit of a metaphor. I've lived in Denver for about 14 years now, but I actually grew up in Indianapolis, and in Indianapolis, May is race month. It's one of those things that just runs so deep in the culture you don't even realize it until you're gone. But there's parades, there's concerts, there's a half marathon, and there's everything that goes along around the race itself. The Indy 500 is steeped in over 100 years of history, and by some measures, it's the largest single day sporting event in the world. They call it the greatest spectacle in racing. But this year, May is going to be quiet at the place they call the Brickyard. That's okay. We're still getting a lot of action with Commercial Excellence Month, and we can lean into this a little bit, in the month of May. And that's where, when we think about racing, the ultimate measure is getting across that finish line first, and it's pretty cut and dry when that happens. In business, there's one moment of truth, and that is the sale. And there's so much that can be wrapped up, especially in a B2B transaction. There's pricing, there's positioning, there's the communications between all the parties involved, getting alignment, getting through the negotiation process, doing all that analysis that goes along for it. And there's a lot riding on it and getting it right. Even when you win, even when you win the deal, there's a lot that can go right and wrong before and after. So, there's things that have changed over the years with sales, and there's and sales technologies and all that, just like in racing. And one of the, leaning into the metaphor to kind of finish up there, one of the things that's changed a lot over the years is the pit stop. And there's some really great videos on YouTube. You can go see, comparisons of, then and now. And in the 1950s, a good pit stop would take about a minute to change all 4 tires and add fuel. And I think they were pretty proud of themselves back then. But you go watch these videos and, there's a guy banging on a wheel with a hammer trying to get it off, and it's, a lot more ramshackle now. But, by the 1990s, a good pit stop could get all that done in about 7 seconds, depending on how much fuel you put in and all that. So it's a pretty marked improvement over a 30 to 40 year time frame. But some of you might notice between these pictures that, not all of these are actually from the Indy 500. Last year in Formula One, teams routinely changed all 4 tires in about 2 seconds. But there's a big difference over the years as the rules changed, and notably right now they don't allow pit stop refueling in Formula One. So when you start looking across motorsports, there's variance not just over time, but across disciplines, where the needs for just a pit stop can be very different depending on the rules, not to mention the team budgets. So that's pretty critical information if you're selling pneumatic guns, for instance. And this is just, this table here, that's just 5 segments and 9 attributes. So, obviously not everybody is selling to race teams, but it's pretty clear that when things start getting complicated, we need better ways of doing business than the manual processes of the past, or we're going to get left behind pretty quickly.
So, Jordan, as we shift gears here to use a little bit of a pun there, I think you've got a poll for us to answer in the Zoom application. Do you want to set that up for us?
Yeah, if we can pop that poll up there, I'd like to get just a kind of an idea of how you view things, or what first comes to mind when you think of the term CPQ. I would love to get a quick poll from our analysts. These are, or from our audience rather, these are things that we hear, and typically I think when you come into it, whether it's configuration or quotes or price lookup, catalog management. If you could take a second and just do the quick Rorschach test and say what first comes to mind when you think of CPQ. Leave that open for a second, and then we can take a look at what we get some of the results here.
All right, we'll get those results back in just a second here. Okay, a little bit of a delay there. I'm going to say that from what I saw, Jordan, I saw, oh, there it is. We've got it up.
Interesting. So yeah, it looks like configuration obviously gets the first pull there, and then price lookup and calculation actually even took the lead. So I think that's kind of interesting, and I think depending on who we've got in the audience, it may be a little bit of a different skew, but I think that's where there's I think there's different ways of looking at CPQ that would want to take a look at and kind of get out there.
For sure, for sure. So hey, we've got our poll there with attendees already, but there's probably still a lot of misconceptions out there around what CPQ is, what CPQ does, right?
Yeah, and we see that a lot. I'm heartened by the poll results. It seems like coming along and bringing CPQ into maybe a different mix than before. But I think one of the most common things that we see and hear first and foremost when we think of CPQ is it's for configuration, and it's for product configuration. And I think this is one of those things where people can come at this from either angle. So I think whether you've got very highly specialized, super configured products, or if you don't do any real product configuration at all, it's still really critical that your sales teams can select products and put together a deal with accurate, rationalized pricing. And CPQ is naturally equipped to do that, especially in an integrated platform like we have at Vendavo. So whether you do or you do not have configured products, CPQ can still be relevant for you. So I think that's a bit of a misnomer that sometimes gets people tripped up just in the labeling of it, right? Configuration, configure, price, quote.
For sure, for sure. I mean, a lot of that, when we talk about that, when you and I talk about it, a lot of times we use the term guided selling. But with that in mind, what does that situation leave existing solutions like CRM or ERP or even existing robust configurators?
Yeah, I think that's a really good and it's a really important question. And now especially is not the time to be viewing CPQ or any other critical capability as a tack-on tool. To be sure, a whole lot of CRM or ERP solutions, they can cover a lot of bases, and they're very good platforms. They can do things like approvals, they can handle documents, they can manage customer data really well. Things like that. But you also want to be careful and ask yourself, when you start extending those platforms, are they just filling a gap? Or are they truly serving your commercial goals? So Gartner and some of the other analyst firms have really good reports on how to identify your CPQ needs and go about an implementation. But you got to find that right balance between convenience, cost, of course, but the effectiveness of the solutions, and even the user experience for the people that are using these solutions and going through those critical activities. You can bet that your best competitors, or at least the ones who are going to become your best competitors, they're thinking about these sorts of things right now. And it's things like user experience that we maybe didn't necessarily think of before. We were thinking of, can it do X, Y, and Z things, and we had the data in there, and I think a lot of us are very data driven, but the user experience part of it is becoming very important as well. So, I think all this kind of comes back to, a kind of a core point, and maybe this is the most important thing I'd like people to take away today. It's that it's not just CPQ anymore. We need to get bust out of our silos, and, apologies for another sort of pun and metaphor there, but, we're going along with my hometown, and we grow a lot of corn and soybeans in Indiana too. But
that's pretty corny. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. As noted by Forrester a few years ago, actually in response to Vendavo entering the CPQ space, it's time to stop worrying about the labels around all of this. And most importantly, what you want to do is you want to focus on your end-to-end, sales and pricing processes, and your true commercial effectiveness, wherever that happens. So, with that in mind, and kind of thinking back to our poll results, which I think line up with this pretty well. I think that's like I said, it's a good thing to see in a session like this. There's two statements that I'll make, and I hold them both to be true. And the first is that CPQ it's a sales tool, and absolutely, it's a sales tool. It's about getting quotes out there. It's about getting products for and in the hands of customers. CPQ is a pricing tool. And I think that's the part that's kind of lagging and coming along lately. It should be a pricing tool. Price is its middle name after all. But I think, most importantly, where it's headed and where these CPQ and related solutions are coming to is that CPQ is truly a holistic, integrated, comprehensive commercial excellence solution. And that's true when we think of where it fits in the Vendavo's commercial excellence portfolio. It's that entire top piece. It's supported by a very strong foundation in pricing, and it's linked through intelligence and analytics. But most critically, I think the big difference is that CPQ is focused on the sales users and those sales related personas. Whether
Jordan,
it's configuration focused and pricing focused, it's that sales process that brings it in.
absolutely. I think a lot of folks think about CPQ. They do exactly what you said. It's the configure price per quote. It's that little bit of process, and don't think about what kind of robustness is behind the configuration, what kind of robustness is behind that quoting capability. And a lot of folks just don't connect the pricing efforts that Vendavo's history is all around in terms of having that sophisticated ability to do pricing, segmentation, granular, adaptive, dynamic pricing served up in a CPQ. So instead of just, here's the list price that goes with product A from column B and product C from column D, and a simple pricing list referral, this is all of your pricing smarts being delivered in a platform that is serving your sales force.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. You really can't have one without the other, right? I think at one of our more recent customer conferences, I used the example of a tree falling in the forest. You don't want your pricing tree to fall in the forest and have nobody hear it. You want to be able to execute on that, and it's it's complicated. I mean, this is a pretty busy slide. There's a lot on here, but they're all critical activities, and we want to make sure that those are really linked together. And CPQ is really built to sit in the middle and bring in a lot of other personas, compared to some of us that may be more analytical and really kind of driven towards that great pricing. So it's about realizing that vision, and that's what allows CPQ to have really fast and disruptive impact when it gets implemented, and how you have those strong practices in place. And so these are some stats that I went and gathered, mostly from Aberdeen Research and also McKinsey. So some of the impacts that CPQ can deliver when it comes to price execution and just commercial execution in general. Right now, certainly you want to be doing everything you can to keep your customers, keep them well, keep them viable. You want to keep them, period. And companies that use CPQ solutions can improve their net retention by around 4.5%. And that's a big chunk, especially these days. And that's not an easy thing to do, especially when you think about sales reps and how they spend their time. And about 70% of their time is not actually spent selling. It's dealing with administrative drudgery. It's just being in systems that they don't want to be in. So companies that use CPQ solutions can increase their quote productivity by around 1/3, and they can also get a lot more out of all those people who do get brought into negotiating a deal, which, you know, a lot of the research has pointed to more and more people being involved in buy cycles and even sell cycles. But, you know, when we think back to the curve and, you know, adapting to the new normal and getting to that transformative phase, when things, you know, are growing and you're growing your teams, it can also make onboarding a whole lot easier for new reps. And really what all this is about is becoming better equipped and better prepared. And companies identified as prepared emerge from recessions with a real meaningful head start, and they see much higher growth rates in the recovery afterwards. So it's about setting yourself up for success, and it's all about that holistic process piece, not just product configuration or just price lists.
Spot on, Jordan. That talks to that transformational piece that we talked about doing that hard work before you see the curve, building up those systems, those capabilities, so that as soon as you see those signals, you've got already in place the capability to pivot, to be agile, to adapt to whatever is on the other side of new normal.
Right.
All right.
Or,
So
you know, it's never no time like the present, even if you feel like there's you know, opportunities for enhancements there, and the process piece can help with that too.
better now than later. Absolutely. All right, so let's transition now. Now that we've set the stage for where CPQ fits and why it's important, we touched on this a little bit already. How do we take all of that and get to the heart of today's theme? That is, CPQ is the ultimate price execution tool.
Yeah. So you hinted at it a little bit in the intro. You know, some of you might know that I do kind of lead a little bit of a double life as an academic researcher. Actually, there's one of us here today is actually a published author, and it's not me yet. So I thought we might take a page, literally, from Mitch, who wrote a chapter in a recent book that was edited by Stefan Liozu, who you might have seen in several of last week's sessions. We collaborate with a lot. Mitch, you wrote about executing effective pricing in 5 simple steps. You happen to remember what those are?
Very fortunately, yes, I do. First, you want to consolidate all your pricing related information into one place so it's very easily accessible. Secondly, you want to organize that pricing information into a good flow of influencing factors. What has impact on your decision-making process around pricing? Then it's really important. This is something that a lot of people miss. You need a common set of definitions, a lexicon around pricing and the framework in terms of when somebody says price, they usually need to explain that a little bit. So that's why you hear terms like pocket price or pocket margin, as opposed to just price or list price. Those things are important to get straight for a common set of communication. Why? Because that way you know who owns what, who owns accountability for those transitions, those changes from one set of pricing to another set of pricing as you move from left to right in the pricing waterfall. Fourth here, really this is table stakes now. AI and automation to identify opportunities and risks. This is part of ingesting all that data. Manual reviews of that are not going to give you all the things you need to do all the time. So leverage automation to have KPIs flag you, to use the AI to tease out trends and terms that are making sense to do something different. This is working well or that's not. And then finally, you know, stand on the shoulders of giants. There's a ton of people that have been doing work for decades out here around pricing waterfalls and the concepts and best practices around things, actions you can take right now to make yourself more profitable. So the question for you, Jordan, is given those simple pricing ideas, how do we bring CPQ into the mix?
Yeah, you know, I like this list a lot, and I thought it was a good blueprint to lay out a range of the benefits that can come from an integrated CPQ solution. So let's dive in on some of these and see how we can make that happen with an integrated, holistic CPQ solution in your stack. So the first step is to consolidate all of your pricing related information into a single system, or at least an integrated one, I would say. You know, some of the things you want to strive for here are to aim for a single source of truth, or again, you know, an integrated one with this, you know, you can at least understand where all of that's coming together. Stop using Excel to manage your price lists. Dave Anderson had a good blog about this on the Vendavo blog a couple months ago. And, I love Excel. I dearly love Excel. It got me here to where I am today. There's a lot of things it does very well. There's a lot of things that it's really not meant for. And it can cause you a lot of problems. And, one of those especially is version control and just making sure everybody's working from the same data, running the same calculations, having the same bugs fixed. So you can run into those limitations pretty quickly, especially in a complex environment, and be able to move away from that. And when you do that, you might need to, expand what you consider to be pricing info. So that's how you can, get more insights into, what's driving segments or kind of how prices come together. And then, being able to tie that all together, you want to make sure that you ensure, the right metadata mapping between all of your applications when you start to build a stack like this for commercial capabilities.
So Jordan, expand on that point a little bit. What do you mean by metadata?
Yeah, so metadata is that, and metadata mapping. That's how you can take data that might exist. It almost certainly exists in multiple places, right? Something like customer data or customer master data. There might, it might be the same. It might be the same list. Usually one system is the system of record. Often it's CRM, but sometimes it's ERP. But you've got fields there, and they might be the same fields. They might be labeled slightly differently in CRM versus ERP. It might be address, it might be shipped to. CPQ is an example of a system. It's designed to sit in the middle of solution sets like that and help rationalize that. So in our CPQ, for instance, in the administrative console, we've got a page. It's actually called connector mapping, and you can actually take those fields and connect them and map them to how they work with fields and objects in CPQ. So that helps map between CRM and CPQ and ERP and vice versa, so that the same data works across those systems in the ways you expect, even though the labeling and the structuring might be somewhat different across the system.
So Jordan, if you pull these things together, if you're working through all of these, it seems like CPQ can really be a great way for sales users to be more connected to the pricing process, understanding what's influencing the pricing.
Yeah, and I think that's where, from my experience at least, I think that's where you can get some of that disconnect, is that, sales reps and sales users are willing to, go along with the pricing structure, just as long as they have some sort of insight as to how and why it came together, and where the system, everybody blames the system, everybody likes to do that, where it landed on these numbers or recommendations. We've got a customer that they do agricultural products and nutritional crop nutrients. They actually they have list pricing, and that's where they start. They actually even call that their starting price, but then they layer on additional calculations that go on to that, freight and tax based on what plant a product ships from and where it's shipping to, and then even things like interest depending on the commercial terms. And the way they view that, and the way they view that with their customers, is that they're building up to a final price, and that's what they negotiate with. And they actually negotiate with all those pieces. They'll even negotiate on currency, and they'll let their customers kind of place some currency triage there, but they can see those steps right there within CPQ, and they can see that price essentially building up to that price, and it's all centralized and transparent. Everybody's working from the same place there.
That sounds pretty powerful.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I think that kind of leads to the next point of being able to organize your pricing information by and I really highlighted these because I think they're really important when you think of the personas that are involved. You want to organize your pricing information into a precise flow of influencing factors. You don't just want to dump it all in one place. I mean, it's great. It's great to be able to have everything in one place to start. That's a lot further than a lot of companies are, a lot of places I've been at least. But this is your opportunity to really kind of consider your internal personas. And that's, your sales reps are different from your sales managers, and different sales teams in different regions may behave in different ways. And you want to focus on what data is relevant for them. You want to make the information really easily consumable and also layered if you want to drill in for more detail. And this is where, this is such a fast process, right? Quoting is so critical. That's how you get your traction. you want to be thoughtful about what information you do use, so you're not overloading there. But you can also, lean on existing concepts like a price waterfall, and that's again, it's just more transparency, and just more information being available. But you want it to be available in the right way so it doesn't get wasted or even kind of confuse them and can cause negative consequences.
That makes sense. Jordan, you mentioned internal user personas. Could you elaborate on that? A couple of examples there, maybe?
Yeah, and that's, again, one of the things that we've, designed CPQ to do is to focus around those sales users. But, you can also set things up in different ways, whether that's by team or by role. Because one of the things we found is that whether it's different regions or selling different products, they may be in a very fast sales cycle with, very quick kind of, not highly configured products, or maybe very complex. We do a lot of usability research, and our UX team does a lot of really great work. We'll get into more detail on that during the product panel next week, and there's great opportunities to participate in that, and everybody who does that really enjoys it. But we get a lot of really rich information from that, and for that reason, we spend a lot of time when we designed this user interface to have pricing guidance, be kind of multi-layered and multi-pronged. You've got visual cues, you've got score cues. If you want to, you can drill in for more information and you can get more detail on what's driving that score if you're the kind of user who wants that. If not, you've got the quick cues and you can drill in from that. But that's where different personas want different views too, like approvers. They may want to see something different, so they can even have like a different basket page and they can see different metrics that might not be available to a sales rep. We had one customer where we worked on a pilot and we ended up bringing in transaction data because they just wanted some sort of situational context before they approved or denied a quote or a discount. And we brought in transaction data and just details on the segment, so what was driving that recommendation. So, as a different persona, we think about sales reps and quoting, but there's other people who are involved in this mix too, just like sales approvers.
Really powerful capabilities there.
Yeah, and that's, I think this all feeds into it just the same, is that, when they started having those conversations around that, just the approval process there, it was getting further along in that process of establishing that common lexicon, like you said, and just common language and way to talk about price and pricing and products and how deals come together. So that's kind of that, even just the organizational framework for how you think about a deal and how it goes through. Is it a rubber stamp process? Is it a deal desk that's going to stand in your way and annoy people, or is it something you can do to work together? So when you go through that process, it allows you to speak with precision. It allows all your other groups to consistently articulate to each other. It helps articulate your value proposition to your clients across your teams to make sure everybody's in line there. And it makes those discussions, it makes them a lot more efficient. You're not spending as much time making sure you're talking about the same metrics because you can see them right in front of you. You start speaking that same language. And, that helps you negotiate with clients. But I think more importantly, and I think this can get forgotten a lot, is it helps you negotiate internally, right? A lot of times, like, we're going back and forth and it's like, why this customer needs this really big discount. Is that consistent behavior across sales reps? Is that consistent behavior across approvals? And when you're running from that same data, you kind of help to harmonize your behavior across that, which is, really probably better for everybody involved. When you do that, like you said, you probably need to think about your KPIs and how you talk about that. And it may require some new metrics, but and that's all the reason you want a system that can handle that. If you come up with a new metric or a new calculation, you don't want to be doing that back of the napkin if you have it right in front of you.
For sure. A lot of times we work in organizations where KPIs become super boiled up. They're meaningful, but they're so broad that they're not necessarily indicative of what you want to happen in the instance. So, and that's especially appropriate or especially a concern when you're kind of shifting for a different set of tactics. So your strategy may be entirely intact, but your tactics need to move a little bit. This is our transformation stage that we're talking about. That's a really good indicator that you need to think about. Perhaps there are some KPIs that are a little more focused on that reflect behaviors. But if we turn now to the talking to customers about, we talk about KPIs, communication in general. How have customers been saying that has been enhanced or enabled through their CPQ implementation?
Yeah, I think that's where it helps the negotiation process. And again, that's internal negotiations, that's negotiations with customers. If you're transparent about that, it can make that process just a lot more efficient. It's not that adversarial game. It's about finding the right solution for everybody involved. It's kind of interesting. We've been working with a lot of customers in Brazil, and they talk about their sales process, and they'll open the book and they'll show everything to customers. I don't think every culture, every company is quite that transparent about it. But even just kind of internally speaking, as opposed to just trying to gain things or trying to just kind of ride thresholds or avoid the deal desk. Where we've heard, again, kind of from usability studies and interviews, we had a customer where, they mentioned that they never, it was an approver in this case, and they never wanted to deny a quote or a discount kind of request. They never wanted to deny it out of pocket. They didn't want to even view it that way. They wanted to have something to talk about and turn each one of them into a coachable moment. So they use that to go back to the sales reps and say, well, this is what I saw in the deal. This is what we're seeing in other kind of segments and the kind of recent trends. And this is why I took such a decision. So you can refine the quotes and refine it based on the commercial processes, not like that, the boiled up KPIs you were talking about. If you have a stale check mark out there, you don't want to just like check the box just to check the box. Like, are you really kind of getting after your goals there? And this allows you to focus on those right things because you're not distracted by all those formalities.
Absolutely. Great way to build that sense, that business sense within all of your team, your sales folks, of course, but all of your team in terms of let's give them the information, the technology, the context so that they can do their job and not worry about administrating a system, right?
Yeah, for sure. Or even, administrating it even from the sales perspective and making sure the quote gets through. And all of that, I think it's table stakes, but it could use a refresher from time to time. And this is kind of a good opportunity to do that. But when we call it table stakes, a lot of times that's table stakes for things like further automation and AI. That of course gets a lot of hype. We talk about it a lot and where it gets there. But one of the things we've heard, from users is that they want to be able to understand how it comes together, and that all drives on transparency and a common understanding. So you have to have all that in place to be able to come to your point of being able to use automation and AI to identify those opportunities and identify those risks and use the data available to you to be more efficient about that. So obviously we like to talk about intelligent CPQ and really that integrated pricing experience where you can get AI-driven target pricing. You can have interactive guidance that drives, from those metrics and from those analytics that come from, either within CPQ or from, other solutions to drive those. Things like segment details, like we talked about, that can come from, those segmentation solutions and recent transactions, whether that's from ERP or coming from, even again, the analytics solutions. And then that's where you can also start to layer in things like business risk alerts. We get that natural text explanation, and going back to, making the data available and consumable. We've built intelligent CPQ out so that you can get that natural text. You can see the initial queue. You can get that natural text explanation if you want more detail. And even if you're so inclined, and if you have the permissions and the roles associated with it, you can drill right into Profit Analyzer and you can see what's driving, that risk alert and, different waterfall views. So, it's building upon that. And, one of the last things I'd mention and kind of what I've got in the screenshot here is, it's going back to the roots, right, of automation. Not everything has to be like AI, like zooming in and doing all these amazing things. It's important and there's certain capabilities around that, but don't forget that like automation is still a thing, and that can be very kind of just deliberate and disciplined, application of things like approval rules and workflow transparency. And, that's something a good CPQ solution can do for you, regardless of how quote unquote intelligent, your solutions are. That can make real improvements.
And having all of that available in the context, in the moment, right there, one screen, not hunting around. I need to check an email for my latest approval levels, or something changed on a guideline. Nope, it's right here. The salesperson knows they can do business rather than do emails.
Yeah, and then they know what's going to happen when they click the button, right? When they click next or they click submit, they submit something for approval. They know what's going to happen. It just doesn't go off as an email that you hope somebody responds to. Of course, these days people aren't traveling or offline quite as much, but that'll be a reality again before too long. And even still, just that it's transparency, it's predictability, so that you can focus on the things that really matter. But lastly, I think, like you said, to stand on the shoulders of giants, you don't want to have to rework everything. This sounds like a lot of work, and it is if you want to do a really good job about it. But that doesn't mean you have to create everything from scratch all the time, all over the place. I think one of the things you can do when you're taking a look at how you're improving upon your commercial capabilities or bringing in, whether it's a new workflow or an entirely new solution, it's an opportunity to avoid worst practices. We did a webcast a few months ago, Mitch, you and I, and we were talking about digital transformation. Who knew we were going to be into that curve much deeper just a few months later. But I think one of the things we brought up then was that at the very least, make sure you avoid worst practices. And if you're building something to map to an old process because that's the way you've always done it, we kind of talked about that being that's probably not a great way to look at things. It's probably actually a pretty terrible way to waste your opportunities and resources. So if you know that there's lag, or if you know there's things that cause people problems, like, use this as an opportunity to get away from that. But when you do that, like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And another bad dad joke here, which is Mitch and I dive into that domain a lot. You don't want to reinvent the wheel, especially if you're selling boats. You don't really need to be worrying about wheels. But the chances are that there's probably some best practices out there that you can leverage, and see either peer sets or related companies and where they're having a success. And it's things like visuals. We've got 3D visualization. There's a lot of research out there that just being able to see a product and interact with that and know what you're getting can really improve your chances of making a sale. And that's true. We're trying that's true in B2B like it is in B2C businesses. But it can also be something as simple as like buyer preferences, and just how they want to consume data and information. And you can make these processes friendlier for your customers too, whether that's communicating your complexity, rolling out different pricing models, or even just basic like units of measure. I mean, I think back to, I used to work in managed services, and we served the hospitality industry. Obviously they're kind of struggling right now, but they've got a lot of very specific metrics that they run by, that are of course really out of whack. But they view things on a daily, monthly sort of basis, and they're very regimented in how they go about that data. And we kind of got to a point where our customers wanted to get pricing on a per room per month basis, and we were running on a per room per day basis. And that's like a really simple kind of calculation, but if you've got things spread out in Excel, or people doing whatever they want, where they've got to go to the calculator, and are they using 30.4 days and calculating the right way? I mean, that can make a big difference. And even little things like that can make a big difference for your customers and how they're consuming your information. So, kind of to wrap things up, that was a kind of a great walk through Mitch's chapter. Thanks for the content there. And, I think it's actually a pretty great book. And Stefan puts out a lot of great content if you're interested in kind of the academic side of it. But one of the reasons I'm really passionate about CPQ, or just more broadly, just the commercial excellence, capabilities, is that CPQ is really, it's a pricing solution and it's a sales solution. It's a really powerful, like, uniting force. And when you get those things bought into, it can make a really big difference, for your companies and for your sales teams, because that's where you get your traction, right? To kind of lean back into the metaphor again, sales, it's a team sport. So if we think back to the Indy 500, at the end of the race, it's several hours long. It's really, you've got to go through several steps of execution, right? You just got to survive to the end, 3-4 hours, 500 miles. And the driver gets all the glory, right? His face gets on the trophy, he's got the wreath around him, but he's not by himself. When he's in victory circle there, he's surrounded by his team. And it's really important to remember that we all, serve that supporting role. That the driver doesn't get across the finish line. He doesn't get into the victory lane. He or she doesn't even get across the starting line if it's not for that team of engineers and people, making sure the car is prepared, the sponsorships are in place, the money's there, and everything's ready to go. And you got to start your engine. So, you want to be able to make sure that you can capitalize on that. And we've all got critical roles to play. CPQ can kind of be that race car, but everything feeds into it to kind of take that pricing engine and turn it into real results. So, we've got another poll to kind of come up, kind of thinking about, today's conversation and CPQ, maybe in a more comprehensive light than we've talked about before. If you were to pick a couple, what are some of the priorities that you would take to, extend those commercial capabilities? And I didn't use CPQ, right? It's those commercial capabilities. It's, are you looking to improve your price optimization? Are you looking to bring in, other analytics? If you would pick a couple, I'd be interested to see what folks say would be, where they'd like to extend those commercial capabilities. Sales enablement, channel enablement, something we're hearing. These are all driven by trends that we're seeing in the market. We'll give that a couple more seconds and see where we end up. All right, sold. All right, so that's interesting. I mean, it's not particularly surprising. I think that everybody's looking to optimize their pricing. We've got a strong result there at the 80%, but then, I think a pretty strong balance between sales enablement, advanced analytics, and e-commerce extensibility, maybe kind of a little bit of an overlap with channel there. I think that's right in line with a lot of what we're hearing in the market, or at least I kind of hear from a CPQ perspective as a product manager and looking how to make these capabilities work together. I think it's going to be a really interesting couple years now that CPQ is maturing along with a lot of these pricing and commercial excellence concepts. It'll be interesting to see kind of what we bring together and how that works with other stacks. And I think this is probably a pretty good reflection of that.
That makes perfect sense, Jordan. Thanks for that. As we go to the next slide here, the good news is wherever you're going on your commercial excellence journey, whatever your aspirations are, we've got teams and solutions and resources to help you take those next steps. You can start at vendavo.com. That's a great place to start. We've got solution demos, analyst reports on all of our solutions, stories from other customers, details on our value consulting practices and results from them. We've got ROI calculators for our CPQ, as well as our other pricing solutions. And we also have our commercial excellence maturity model, which a lot of you have probably seen before. It's something that we're really embracing, and we're doing some academic research on in partnership with Jordan's research persona that he mentioned, and other teams at the University of Calgary. So if you haven't taken it, here's your chance. That's the QR code there and the bit.ly link to get into it. And that will help you step through where you are on the different capabilities within commercial excellence. And you'll get a detailed report out of that in terms of your score, steps you might consider for steps to move yourself along that commercial excellence maturity, and a comparison against what other folks have said in terms of averages across these answers that we're seeing. So really interesting stuff and insightful in terms of next steps.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of benchmarking out of that now, and like you mentioned, it's things that our value consulting practice is really starting to take into account. We're even taking that into account into best practices and things we're building into the products. But yeah, definitely encourage you to take a look at that and complete it if you haven't. It's a pretty quick process, and you get a report out of it. It's a really good kind of conversation starter. Maybe look at where you want to invest and take those capabilities, and that's one of the things we'll be doing in the follow-ups in terms of the research partnership is where these investments are made and where you can get the most bang for your buck. So definitely for your own benefit, always encourage that, but certainly appreciate the contributions to research that we're being able to get out of this, and then best practice through things like value consulting.
Super, fantastic.
All right, so I'll go ahead and wrap up, kind of my piece here, and then we can maybe, turn to some more of the interactive portions. But, like I said at the beginning, I think it's a really exciting time for CPQ. I think it's really exciting time for commercial excellence concepts, and just really more broadly, looking forward to taking these capabilities, just generally speaking, forward. It's something we do really in partnership with many of you. We work very closely, more closely than any other kind of product management organization I've been with, whether that's through UX, directly with our customers. But we're really here to make sure that you can claim your commercial edge, and we can do that together. So we can get across the finish line and be the ones that all together, we're in the winner's circle, and we're kissing the art of bricks. To stretch that metaphor one last time.
I appreciate the puns. That's great stuff. Thanks, Jordan. Let's shift over now to our Q&A section. And of course, use that functionality there on the Zoom so that you can ask your questions. We've got a couple of questions coming in already. Let's do this one, Jordan. Which teams are leading CPQ initiatives these days? Is it pricing, sales, or some other function?
I think that's one of the places where we're seeing the evolution of the CPQ concept, is that I think it generally had been led by sales very strongly in the past, or very kind of tightly knit sales type organizations, especially when it was coming up and coming of age through manufacturing and through that configuration focus. But now that middle initial, the price and CPQ is coming up in terms of importance. People are realizing how it all fits together, and we're actually seeing a lot of CPQ initiatives get led and started now from even the pricing angle, or even a holistic, comprehensive effort where everybody's involved. Kind of broader RFPs that may even get broken up, but we're seeing more of a mix. And I think pricing, finance, even executive kind of leadership organizations are getting involved in the CPQ process, especially because it's not just CPQ anymore, right? It's being tied to the broader commercial excellence capabilities.
Yes, people are recognizing that the need to connect the ERP side with the CRM side. Next question, who are some of the leaders that need to be involved to make a CPQ implementation go well?
Yeah, I think I hit on a couple of them. Obviously, if you can, and it can slow things down. So getting people involved can be a little tricky and dangerous, but you really probably want that organizational buy-in. So that's where we're seeing CFOs involved, CEOs involved, even certainly sales leaders are very central to the process, and who we've worked with a lot before. But people like IT. And even the administrative side, you want to have some respect, even if they're not necessarily involved in the process. You want to think about them and how it's going to impact them, because selfishly speaking, a really good administrator can go a long way to making, whether it's CRM or CPQ, or probably really most enterprise grade solutions, but we see it a lot in CPQ, that a smart, engaged administrator can solve a lot of problems for you, to prevent a lot of problems from happening. So you don't want to forget about that side of the business too. They might not sit in the corner office, but they're going to be very integral to your success.
That's a key point there, Jordan. The aspects of change management. So this is one of the key capabilities that our value consulting team brings to bear. Is yes, they absolutely know best practices in pricing and can help folks from the business problem side, but they also have deep capabilities in terms of helping our customers understand the change management implementation issues, and that goes as far as leading communication programs to say, yes, don't forget the admin folks, don't forget the sales folks, don't forget the IT folks. Keep that cycle of communication tight and fresh, bringing everybody along, high level alignment. So lots of learnings from Vendavo implementations across all over the world of all sizes, bringing that to bear for folks in their implementations. That's available, and certainly adds to the profitability, the return on the investment, and it certainly de-risks the project as well. Next question, Jordan. What are the analytics capabilities of CPQ? You touched on this a little bit, but there's a specifics there.
Yeah, it's kind of a broad question. The way we've built out analytics to work with CPQ is, again, we've mainly tried to focus on kind of that contextual guidance, but we've also tried to make that layered. So I would say, a lot of the analytics capabilities are actually kind of underlying or embedded when we have more of a comprehensive solution, and that's when you get back into things like Profit Analyzer. Now we have, even kind of the segmentation models you're able to build in deal price guidance, kind of the list price management in price point. Those all have their own sort of analytics views for the purposes that they bring to bear. So all of those feed into CPQ. We do have visuals for pricing guidance. Like I mentioned, we can even step into Profit Analyzer workspaces. You can bring in Power BI workflows if you want to build some more kind of specific views or reporting. But it's something that we've tried to be very careful and deliberate about when we bring that into the workflow, because the primary purpose of CPQ is for salespeople to go sell stuff. So we want to bring in the right level of information to help inform them. We also don't want to slow it down, because that's as the saying goes, and as the Gartner and other research goes, the first quote wins. So we're trying to be just right. But I think that's a simmering topic that will be something that we work through, probably for years, but certainly over the next couple of years. What sort of information can we bring in? What sort of information should we bring in? And it's something that we're looking to kind of ride that balance.
Super, makes sense. And here's a quick, this is more of a comment than a question, but the comment is good insight about assigning coaching activity if we see sales guys start breaching price floors often. So yeah, that a really great specific instance there.
Yeah.
One more question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Kind of that coaching focus is that you want to turn it into a coaching focus, and you don't want to turn it into a game. You don't want, pricing, you don't want people chasing the floor at all. The floor is not a target. The target is the target, right? When we have target stretch floor pricing, there's a lot of research that goes into that, and what we'll be able to bring in. And a lot of our customers, we don't even show floor. We don't even try to create that, because that's not really what the overall goal is. And that's something we work with, even our Vendavo teams on.
Absolutely, yeah. That giving the context where the sales folks feel comfortable that they've got the right price, and being able to test that out, not just going to the floor to miss those approval levels. Absolutely. We got just a couple of minutes left. One more question, Jordan. Is CPQ being used to replace core price management and optimization solutions?
I think the way I've been talking about it, and the way that we're trying to approach it, certainly, CPQ can be used in a standalone fashion, and coming from where it came from, and it was a standalone solution. It was not necessarily tightly bound to all these pricing solutions that a lot of us come from. It can do a lot of that work, but I think our general answer is that it can, but it probably shouldn't. And, if you're really wanting to be comprehensive about it, make sure your solutions are geared towards what they are for. Vendavo Price Point does a really great job in terms of list price management and kind of deep complexity there. Same with deal price guidance for building out those segmentation trees, and those solutions are there for those purposes that can then feed into your CPQ solution. So I think in an ideal world, no. Can it serve the purpose? Yes, but it's complementary. It's not a replacement if you're really looking to get the most out of it.
Really kind of depends on where your key focus area, where you in your organization feel you need to take action first. Certainly you can take action with CPQ first, but that's why we talk about a commercial excellence platform. All those capabilities are there, and we can help you decide which one gets you faster, farther, ensures your profitability faster, and reduces risk as you think about what comes after that.
Yeah, you don't want to build yourself into a Frankenstein, and
Exactly.
I think we all know what that's like.
Exactly. Jordan, I think that's it. Appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us in this discussion. Really fruitful information there. Real quickly for everyone on the webcast right now, a recap of what's coming up next. Friday, it's Vendavo's Value Consulting team. We mentioned that a couple of times today. Again, last year they delivered $500 million across 27 engagements. If you come in and listen, you'll get some great insight on how that might leverage things you're thinking about. And then next week on Monday and Tuesday, we're really turning the emphasis to customer-only interactive sessions. This is about building up our community as pricers, as Vendavo community here. On Monday, it'll be you again, Jordan. Jose Fontanez will join us, and we're going to get into more the nuts and bolts of the application of the Vendavo CPQ, a little more road mapping and things that are coming up. And then on Tuesday, Carl Larson and Sjoerd van Kessel are going to be covering the nuts and bolts, the ins and outs of Vendavo price point. Again, customer focused. It's customer attendance only on those, but we'll be talking about real market solutions for real market problems. Again, the links for these on-demand sessions are coming. That'll be in emails. You can always register with that scan code there on your screen or head over to vendavo.com. And so thanks to all who are attending virtually. This is Mitch Lee, your profit evangelist, saying until we meet again, have a profitable day.